Hey there, I'm Jackie Ferris. This week, the 302 is getting creative with an artist profile. We are in the creative space of fiber artist Sarah Pavlik, talking about her process and her inspiration. Get ready for a colorful and cool show. The 302 is headed your way. Welcome to the creative studio of Sarah Pavlik. I'm joined now by the artist herself. Thank you so much for inviting us into your creative space.
Thank you for coming.
So I know that you're an artist, you do many different things, but what do you actually call what we're going to be seeing today? Are they quilts? Are they abstract sculptures?
So I am an artist, and fiber is my medium. So I do make a lot of contemporary art quilts. But I also use paper and do collage, and I paint fabric and fold it and stitch it, and so I do many things with fabric. So I sometimes call myself a fiber artist, sometimes a quilt artist, but an artist first and foremost.
Now we have a couple of examples of your work in various stages. Can you kind of show us what your process is? I mean, it really is dynamic.
Well, thank you. So this is a piece that is almost finished. I'm composing the edges of the area. So it was a piece that I created by taking large, shapes and placing them on the wall, trying to find a way to put them together so that the piece creates tension but interest with color and the placement of the shapes. The final step will be to put batting behind it and then a backing, and then I will bring it over to my quilting machine where I will quilt it very, very densely. This is a piece that I've finished that's a longer piece, and this piece I created by taking earth pigments and adhering them to the cloth through a process with soy milk, actually. Oh. And so I made prints with various objects to create the marks on the cloth. And then I also use my design wall where I cut out shapes, I put them on the wall, then I respond to them. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a call and respond technique, which is not unheard of in the art world. Many artists who work in the contemporary art field use some kind of a call and response technique to create their work. But it's not really unlike a traditional artist that is doing something realistic. We're still looking for a dynamic composition that includes variation of shapes and line and interesting color, just like if you were painting a portrait. So at any rate, so I put the shapes on the wall, I eventually sew them together again, and then I put a backing on it, I put quilt batting inside, and then if you did see this close up, you will see a lot of dense stitching that is finishing the piece.
That's amazing. I really enjoy, is it okay if I touch it?
Oh, absolutely, please.
I'm really enjoying the texture. I mean, it has so much going on. It's so interesting to the eye and to the feel. Now, are your pieces made to be looked at, or do you encourage people once they, take them home, of course, to touch them and interact with them?
If you're in a gallery, you should never touch the artwork, obviously. But that is what is really cool about fiber art, is that it does have that tactile or sensory feeling to it. And that's why I really like the dense stitching in my work, because I like to have like another layer of texture that's both visual but also that you can feel it.
How long does it take you to do a piece like this?
People often ask me that, and it is so difficult to say, because some pieces might take months and months because I can't figure them out. It's a piece that I've I've started and I've put shapes on the wall, but then it's just not speaking to me. I'm just like, I can't figure you out. I don't know what to do with you. Sometimes I sleep on it. Sometimes I put other things over it because I just can't figure it out, or I'm just like sick of it or bored of it or that kind of thing. And then sometimes I might come back to it later and I'll figure out what to do. So sometimes I can do something in a week, sometimes a couple of days, but then sometimes it can take months. So
much longer.
Yeah.
So the what's happening behind you, this is how it starts, right?
Right. So this is a piece that I actually just began last night, and it started from looking at other artwork of artists that I love and picking out shapes and lines that I like from their work and then creating my own composition. And so I drew something on my sketchbook, and then I started actually digging through my stash. Like, I have like a lot of these containers full of different fabrics that have been used. They've been from other projects and leftover pieces. And so sometimes the shapes in here are exactly what I need, but I don't know it yet. So I really enjoy like the element of chance in my work, but it's what I do with that chance in the end that's going to make the interesting piece come out. So what I started doing is looking at my sketchbook and then placing the shapes on the wall. And then I will begin moving them around, changing out the colors. I will photograph it, and then I will change on my phone is very useful to me because I can take my phone and I can change it to a grayscale so that I can see the contrast. Like, sometimes a piece won't have enough contrast. That is actually a problem I have oftentimes with my work, is that it becomes very monochromatic. And so I have to kind of work to get away from that so that I have contrast in the piece. And so then I'll create like new figures that come out of the work. So this is in the very, very beginning stages, and the finished piece will probably not look anything like this, but it's a way to get started. So I put the shapes up here, and then I have to figure out how I'm going to put them together, which is kind of a construction nightmare sometimes. So because we have these seam allowances. So like, if you look at the back of this piece, you can see that I have to take into account, you know, a 1/4 inch on each side of the piece.
So the pieces are smaller.
Yeah, so the pieces kind of get smaller, and so then you have to figure out, like, how do I sew this together, like this to this? Well, you know, there's this edge here. Do I still need this? Well, I turn it under, and then I end up cutting that off, and then I have to add something else in here. So you kind of have to figure out how to sew this to this to this to this to this. And so it becomes like this complicated puzzle of putting the work together. So like a painter, I mean, sometimes I go to painting because for a while, just to kind of cleanse myself, because painting is very quick. You can just paint a shape, you don't like it, you repaint it. But when you work as a fiber artist and you're sewing these shapes together, you know, you can hack off a piece, but you can't add it back on unless you sew a whole nother color or that kind of thing.
So it's constantly changing and evolving even as it's being put together.
It can.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then sometimes you'll get the whole thing finished and you might not even like it. And so like a painter, you could just paint over your canvas, but a quilt maker, you know, it's done.
Yeah.
So I have tried painting over some of my quilts, actually, not very successfully. But so at any rate, so again, this is in the beginning stages, and then once it is complete, I will add the quilt batting and the backing, and then I will take it over to my quilting machine where I will densely quilt it.
Fantastic. Now we're going to learn more about your art when we return.
Hi, I'm Rachel Delaterio, the librarian and archivist at the Delaware Art Museum, and the 302 is the Big Cheese.
Welcome back. We are diving into the creative world of Sarah Pavlik, and we've now moved to the cutting table so you can kind of show us, you know, how the process starts off and how you mix and match until you get to a place of satisfaction.
Okay. So sometimes as a abstract or a contemporary artist, you're not really sure where to start. You don't know where you're going. You might have an idea of something you want to work on, but you're not sure how to get going. So sometimes I will take scraps out of my scrap bin, and then I will sew pieces together to create new configurations. This is the rotary cutter, which it becomes like an extension of my arm, so it's like
Okay.
a drawing tool. So I will take 2 pieces of fabric, and then I will possibly cut along a curve of 1 piece of fabric, and then it's removed the piece
Nice.
behind it, and then I will pin it. And so then I will do like a series of these. So I'll just pin one and I'll set it to the side, and then I'm going to be bringing it over to my sewing machine at some point. And so here's another couple pieces that, I'll cut that off because it's like extra, cut along this curve, and then I pin it, and then I'm going to be bringing it over to my sewing machine. So by taking these different colors and shapes without a lot of thought and sewing them together, I'll create new shapes. And then those new shapes will be taken over to my wall, and then I will determine how I'm going to put them together to compose a piece.
So speaking of pieces, I have to ask you about the piece over your shoulder. It is
Okay.
so beautiful, and you can
thank
really
you.
see how labor intensive this is. It's just phenomenal. Tell me about that.
Well, thank you very much. This is a piece that I call Going Someplace and Not Looking Back. I named it after a line in a Bruce Springsteen song that is slightly improvised. But it was a piece that I composed when I was really thinking about, well, initially I was thinking that I have to make something good. I want to make something grand. This has to be beautiful. Well, I'm working on this piece, and then I realized that I need to just enjoy the process and not worry about it being perfect, because maybe it'll be a great piece, maybe it won't. So I just let go of my preconceived notions of making something good, and because I wanted to look forward and not back. And so the piece just kind of came out of me. I got in the zone and it came together. And so I'm very happy with that piece.
You mentioned Bruce Springsteen. I mean, do you listen to his music? What music, or if any, do you listen to while you're creating?
Sometimes I listen to Bruce Springsteen. Sometimes I listen to Les Miserables. Sometimes Jesus Christ Superstar. I'll listen to a lot of different things, and then also a lot of podcasts.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'll get in my zone and I forget what I'm listening to, and then I just have silence because I'm in my head, and so I don't really need anything to listen to.
Yeah, kind of getting into a state of free flow,
Absolutely.
as it were.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, there's also the piece, the fish. This is another piece that you did, right?
This is actually a painting.
Okay.
So this was a piece that I did a series of paintings where I used a drip technique. So I would draw something very loosely with a lot of ink on the canvas, and then I would move the canvas around to create new shapes. I'm not a realistic artist, obviously. I just like the movement that you get when something is not planned, and that element of chance comes into the piece. So I created this kind of weird amorphous, like, is it a fish? Is it a lizard? You're not quite sure exactly what it is. I like that questioning that occurs when you're looking at a piece and you're just trying to figure it out, and also you want to keep looking at it to figure it out. So you're not just looking at it and then just you're done. You want to, there's something that makes you continue to look at the piece and find interest in the work.
It mirrors what you do with fabric, with, fiber, in that it's sectioned, it's got pieces, and it almost looks like there are little people throughout the piece. It really is fascinating.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah. So, we talked a little bit about these two pieces, but another piece that I think is really cool, they almost remind me of, and pardon the comparison, advent calendars in the corner. It's like, talk to me a little bit about the boxes and the opening.
Okay, so sometimes when I'm working, I'm trying to think, what else could I do? What if is a question that I ask myself a lot. Like, what if I do this? What if I do that? And because I do like painting, but I also like quilt making and cutting up shapes and putting them back together again, I've been experimenting with painting on fabric and then stitching it and then folding it up and then restitching it together again. And so I created these these pieces that is representative of that. And so they're like, you know, what's inside there? You're not quite sure.
Open to the imagination.
Open to the
and you can
yes,
sit and you can
literally.
look at these things for a very long time and see something different, because maybe you're paying attention to the stitching, or maybe you're paying attention to the way a certain color interacts with another.
Exactly.
And so, I mean, mission accomplished with getting people to come back to the image over and over again.
Well, thank you. You got it.
Well, we're going to learn more about your process and maybe about how you got interested in art in the first place when we return.
Hi, I'm Brian Miller, Associate Curator at the Historic Odessa Foundation, and I just love the history on the 302.
Welcome back. We have moved to the sewing table, and Sarah is showing us how she joins some of the fabrics together.
Yes, so after I leave my cutting table, I will come over, usually with a pile of things, or even sometimes just 2 fabrics, because I'm working directly from the wall to my machine. My process is actually very physical. Sometimes when people think of quilt makers, they think of it possibly as a sedentary practice where you're just sitting sewing. But I am getting up and down from the machine over to my ironing board, and then back to the wall to look at the work and respond to it. So it's a very interactive process and a very physical process. Sometimes I'm up and down on my ladder, putting shapes way up depending on how large the piece is, and then back to my machine, sewing these shapes together. And so sometimes I'll have several shapes that I've lined up that I'm getting ready to sew together. And I really just love the process of, it's kind of strange, but to cut things up and then just to sew them back together again. Some people don't get it. They're wondering, why don't you just buy something that's already finished? But at any rate, I just love the process of creating new shapes, new textures, using color, analyzing the color and how it relates to each other, how the colors relate to each other. It's really exciting.
I wanted to show this. Now, this is a piece of fabric that you have stiffened and painted and sewn, and you're going to end up cutting this into squares or something?
I haven't fully decided what I'm going to do with this yet. Sometimes when I'm feeling blocked or just kind of tired of what I'm working on, I will take a piece of cheap muslin and I will stiffen it with a matte medium, and then I will just paint. And then what happens is the paint sinks back to the back side, and then sometimes I flip it over.
Oh wow, look at this, that's totally different.
Yeah, and then I'll paint on the other side. And so I've used some of these to cut up and then to create those sculptural pieces that we talked about earlier. Because when you cut it up and then you get these smaller squares, sometimes you'll get like these really interesting shapes and lines that come out of it. And so because I'm also a sewer, I've stitched on it just to add like more texture. So this might get cut up into one of those sculptural pieces, or I might cut up shapes and make a collage with it. I'm not quite sure. I do have that piece up there, which I don't know if you can see
We'll get a shot of it. Yeah, that's really amazing. So
that was a very, very long piece of cheap muslin that I printed and painted and made rubbings with corn cobs and springs and just to create a lot of different texture, and then I molded it around to create a sculptural piece. So.
Now your work is very well thought out, very practiced. I'm curious, how do you get to this space? How did you start? How did you know I'm going to be an artist? This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to work in fabric and I'm going to paint and stitch, and I mean, what's the journey?
So I didn't know. Yeah. I didn't really know that this is what would come out of me eventually. But everyone has the capacity to be creative if they want to be. We all have that, whether the creativity is in filmmaking or in producing documentaries or, you know, in painting or quilt making or whatever it is. It could be gardening, it could be cooking. We all have that creative energy that, you know, we decide what we want to do. But it all really comes from my mother. My mother died 3 years ago at the age of 98. And she was a very, very creative person. She did artwork, but she also, not a lot, I mean, she was mainly a mother, but just the way she would place things around the house and the way she would put together gifts for other people, she had a creative touch and a creative energy about her. And when we have 3 children, and one of our, so we initially had twins, and one of our twins, we found out, had a severe disability. And so it was very difficult raising him and determining what to do best for him. And it was incredibly stressful. And so some friends invited me to be part of a quilt group. And initially I didn't really want to, I wasn't interested in it, but I had always sewn growing up, and so I decided to do it. And when I did it, I fell in love with all of the tools and the patterns, and so I made traditional quilts for many years before I ventured into art quilt making. But my mother was very inspirational in that she decided she wanted to give me the best sewing machine available at that time, because she wanted to give me the gift of creativity so I could continue my work with a good machine, because the best tools are always fun to use, the most fun to use. So, you know, she is just very inspirational to me. And right now I have a quilt on exhibition in Germany, in a show that's been curated by Nancy Crow. And I've been studying with Nancy Crow actually for over 20 years. And Nancy is, she's 81 years old, and she is a quilt artist who is one of the people responsible for recognizing quilt as art, like over 25 years ago. And so she is a force. I go study with her for a month every October, and sometimes in May also. She has a large barn where people come from all over the world to study with her. So it was really when I heard about her after beginning my quilt making journey, where I went to her barn and I began taking workshops from her, and she taught abstract composition. She teaches abstract composition. And so I continue to study with her, and then now I'm involved in one of her shows where there are 40 artists who are part of this exhibition. And the exhibition will be coming to the International Quilt Museum in March, which is located in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Okay.
And so the piece that I have, I'm sorry, I might have just jumped out of your
No, you're fine.
The piece that I have in the show is this one, and you might not be able to tell what it is right now, but they're letters.
Oh, they're letters?
Yeah, and these are words that my mother spoke one day when I was taking care of her. She walked down the hallway and she said, "Sarah, I hope to have something clever to say right before I die." And I said, "That is hilarious." And I'm gonna write that down right now. So I started writing down different things that she would say. That I thought were very interesting and clever. And then I incorporated those words into this piece. And this is a very large quilt. It's actually 80 inches by 80 inches. And so the strands say, "I hope to have something clever to say right before I die." And then this last line says, "I plan to die standing," which is another thing that she said one morning, which was pretty funny, because she wanted to go from being alive to being dead. And just no puttering around, you know, laying in bed. No, that wasn't her. She wanted, and she did. She died in her own home, on her screen and porch in the front of her house, and that was
What an
what she
amazing
wanted.
inspiration.
Yeah, at age 98, it was amazing. So her spirit really speaks through me all the time, because she was just a very funny, interesting, creative person.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for sharing your inspiration and the story of your mom and all of your work. We really have enjoyed our time with you.
Thank you. I'm so glad you came.
We'll be right back. Aren't Sarah's creations amazing? Now here are some other things you might want to check out. If you'd like to check out more of Sarah's work, all you have to do is visit sarahjpavlik.com. That'll do it for this week's episode of The 302. Make sure you follow us on Facebook for some behind-the-scenes content you're just not going to get anywhere else. We're going to leave you now with a beauty shot of the Lewis-Rehoboth Canal. Until next time, I'm Jackie Ferris. Tell them you saw it on The 302.